What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today, as I always do every Wednesday, to talk about all of the backfields in Week 10 of fantasy football. I'm going to go over each matchup, talk about the usage, some of the trends that we've been seeing, who's being upgraded, downgraded, who you should sell high, buy low, and also who you should be starting, who you should be sitting, and who you should be flexing this week in fantasy football. If you guys enjoy this video at any point, as always, go down to the bottom of the video, hit the like button. It helps us grow. It helps us out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below while you're down there, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're going to hit the intro, and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so we do have 4 teams on bye this week. We have the Bears, Bengals, Texans, and Giants on bye. So that means no David Montgomery, no Joe Mixon, no Saquon Barkley, and no Devontae Booker in this one. One addition that I'm actually going to add to these videos this week and going forward is this matchup chart. So you guys should be able to see a matchup chart over my right shoulder or left shoulder. I can't remember which way it's actually set up right now, but to save me some time from reading off of, X running back has this defense and their top 10 in DVOA and top 10 in adjusted fantasy points allowed, what I'm going to do is just leave this on the screen. And as I talk about each guy, just make reference to it and see the matchups that way. It'll save me a lot of time, make sure these videos are clear and concise. Don't want to take up any more time than we need to. So without further ado, let's get into the first game. Thursday night football, Ravens at Dolphins. In this game, you're going to be starting Myles Gaskin, flexing Devontae Freeman, but only if Latavius Murray is out. So on the Dolphins backfield, Gaskin has seen a slight uptick in his role since Malcolm Brown has been put on IR. He's actually getting about low-end RB2 usage, which is where I have him ranked right now. I have him at RB22 coming into the week. As you guys can see, since Malcolm Brown has been out, which I believe was week 7 was the first week that he was out, he's consistently getting about 60 to 70% of the team snaps. He's getting the majority of the carries. He's also getting a majority of the routes as well. So this is a guy that you can actually trust in your lineup right now. I know it was, rocky sailing with Myles Gaskin in the past because some games they were giving it to Malcolm Brown, some games they were giving it to Myles Gaskin, but now with Malcolm Brown out, it looks like Gaskin is the dude in this backfield, and he is a guy that I think you can comfortably start as a top 24 running back. The Ravens backfield, on the other hand, is still a mess, but with Latavius Murray out again, likely going to be out again. He did not practice yesterday, which was Tuesday. We'll have to see if he practices today, Wednesday, but Thursday night football is, a short week. So if he was dealing with something last week, there's a good chance he doesn't play again this week. Freeman is actually getting enough work to make him a top 30 running back in my rankings. As you guys can see, with Murray out last week, 58% of the snaps, 56-ish% of the routes. Rush attempts obviously are going to be lower because of Lamar Jackson, but also getting the 2-minute drill and long down and distance. He has a good chance for a touchdown in the offense that he plays for. So he is a guy that I'd be actually considering starting if you guys do need a guy probably fresh off the waiver wire that you could pick up and throw into your lineup. Let's say you have Joe Mixon on bye or something like that. So he's the guy that I think you should be aware of. Saints at Titans, the next game that we have here. Alvin Kamara is obviously in your starting lineup, and Jeremy McNichols, Adrian Peterson. I'll provide some clarity in a second, but I would say if you're going to start one of them, it should be McNichols, but only if you're desperate. Kamara on the Saints side of things is receiving the usage that he saw his first couple of years in the NFL. That's kind of the biggest takeaway since Mark Ingram came over from Houston, is that Kamara is being dialed back to his old role where he was a 65-70% snap share running back. He was obviously running a lot of routes, getting a lot of targets, being very efficient, very talented, as Alvin Kamara always is. But this offense isn't quite as good as it used to be, right? With no Drew Brees, with no Michael Thomas. They're not going to have the same amount of scoring opportunities as Alvin Kamara did with Mark Ingram in the past. So that definitely downgrades him to probably like a, running back 5 to 8 in terms of rest of season rankings, but he is still a guy that is very valuable. Mark Ingram, of course, is going to be a guy that is a valuable handcuff as well if anything were to happen to Alvin Kamara, but not a guy that I'm willing to start on his own. These two, on the other hand, these two Titans running backs, as expected, will be complements to each other and to the passing game. They're not going to be Derrick Henry. They're not even going to be 50% of Derrick Henry, to be honest. And there's nothing really special about either guy. It's a very tough matchup on the ground, so I'm not willing to start Adrian Peterson. Maybe Jeremy McNichols is a play because the Saints are a little bit more exploitable through the air, pass-catching running backs. As you guys can see on the screen, the roles were as expected. Adrian Peterson is going to be the primary 1 and 2 down guy, going to get most of the carries, but Jeremy McNichols is going to run more routes. He's going to be the guy in long down and distance in 2-minute drill situations, and he's going to get the majority of the targets out of the backfield. So if you guys do need to start one of these running backs, it will be Jeremy McNichols for me this week, but I probably wouldn't start any of them if you have better options. And Bills at Jets, the next game that we have here. And speaking of better options, I think you could start Michael Carter for sure. And I think both of these Bills running backs are low-end flex plays. Neither guy is a guy that I'm excited about starting. The Bills backfield did take a turn for the worse in terms of clarity this past week, as you guys can see on the screen. Zach Moss had traditionally been the guy that we were relying on in this backfield, 60% of the snaps or so. And he dropped down to 28% of the snaps this past week. Devin Singletary up to 72% of the snaps. And obviously the carries and rush attempts and routes were all, kind of varied as well. Because the one thing we could count on was Zach Moss running more routes, Devin Singletary getting a couple carries here and there, but that's kind of been completely flipped on his head. But the one thing I will say about this matchup is that the Jets are the single worst run defense in the league. So the low-end flex play territory that I'm talking about for these Bills running backs, I think is warranted. This is a team that you can easily run on. We saw Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines both run on this team with a very high degree of success on Thursday night last week. So I think this Bills backfield, again, not one that you should start if you have great options, but if you're desperate, if you have Mixon on bye, if you need to choose between these Titans running backs and these Bills running backs, I would roll with the Bills guys in that situation. Michael Carter, on the other hand, his receiving work took a big time dip last week with no Mike White in the lineup. He did suffer a forearm injury on Thursday night. Josh Johnson came in relief, obviously, but Mike White will be starting this game. It's already been announced by Robert Saleh that he is going to start. It sounds like Zach Wilson needs another week or two to get back to full strength. So Michael Carter, to me, is my RB15 on the week, ahead of a guy like James Robinson, Elijah Mitchell, and Darrell Williams. Even though he has a very tough matchup on the ground from a rushing perspective, that receiving workload and that receiving volume that he saw with Mike White in the past couple of weeks will help buoy his fantasy value even in a tough matchup. As you guys can see, his role didn't really change last week. He just didn't get the targets on the routes that he was running. Still was splitting time on long down and distance with 2-minute drill snaps as well with Ty Johnson, but he just wasn't getting targeted by a guy like Josh Johnson because he just doesn't target his running backs as much as Mike White does. So the Lions at Steelers, the next game that we're going to talk about here. In this game, you're going to start DeAndre Swift and start Najee Harris. These two guys are obviously studs. You guys should know to start them every single week. They get all of the valuable work in their backfields, 2-minute drill, goal line, everything that you guys want from them. One of them, though, does have a very tough matchup. DeAndre Swift going up against the Steelers defense. They're tough against, the run. They're tough against pass catching running backs. They're tough against everybody that has an RB beside their name. So very difficult matchup for DeAndre Swift, although he should be just fine because of his volume. I still have him inside my top 15 running backs. Najee Harris, on the other hand, though, has an absolutely smash spot. The Detroit Lions are terrible against running backs, and we know Najee Harris is a guy that gets fed volume. So 30-plus opportunities is absolutely in the cards for a guy like Najee Harris this week. Going to be a very popular DFS play. Jaguars at Colts in this game. Again, pretty straightforward. Start James Robinson and start Jonathan Taylor. I think this one's another easy one. James Robinson is expected back, and he does draw a brutal matchup against a Colts run defense that has been very good this year, but I am still starting him as a top 18 guy. Not a lock if you have great options. If you have to choose between DeAndre Swift and James Robinson, if you're in a shallower league or something, then I would go towards a guy like DeAndre Swift because this matchup is very tough for James Robinson, and he is coming off of an injury, but I'm still, going to start him as a top 18 guy because the volume and the role has been consistent overall this season. Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor, of course, currently leads the NFL inside the 5 carries with 18 and yards created overall. He's playing well. He's getting the volume. The offense is getting better and more healthy, especially along the offensive line. So just an absolute stud that may or may not have been my league-winning running back pick in our draft guide this offseason. So kudos to you guys if you have Jonathan Taylor, because he looks to be a top 3, top 5 running back at minimum the rest of the year, if not maybe even the RB1. So Buccaneers at Washington football team. Start Leonard Fournette, and I don't even know what to do with the Washington backfield at this point. Fournette is what he is. You know what you're getting by now. As you guys can see on the screen, he is getting the majority of the snaps, majority of the carries, majority of the routes, majority of the targets, all the inside the 5 work, everything that you could want out of Leonard Fournette, you're getting. You're getting a guy that gets 3 to 5 targets per game, 15 to 20 carries per game, always has a good shot at a touchdown playing for one of the best offenses in the league. The only thing that he doesn't get is a monopoly on the 2-minute drill snaps in the long down and distance. Gio Bernard is still involved to some degree, but Leonard Fournette, to me, nonetheless, is still a top 15 running back rest of the season, top 15 running back this week, especially. I do have him inside my top 12 actually this week. So the real question is, on the other side of things, does this Washington backfield change, right? Because early in the season, we saw what we wanted to see out of Antonio Gibson. We saw him getting more carries, getting more routes, getting more targets. And then the injury crept up on him, the shin injury that he's been dealing with. And then his role started to diminish week over week. With a healthy week of rest last week, do we see Gibson get back up to Antonio Gibson status, right? His old self, where he was getting 65% of the snaps. JD McKissic was involved, but he wasn't like as involved as Antonio Gibson. I wish we didn't have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense this week to find out if Antonio Gibson is back to his full self, because it would present a selling window. If Antonio Gibson had a 70% snap share game and blew the fuck up against the Jets defense, then you could probably sell high on him. And that's probably what I would do, because I do have Antonio Gibson, but he's going to have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, probably not a great defense to have a get right game against, because we know how good they are against the run, especially the role that Gibson has. That's the type of matchup that he isn't going to be able to exploit, because he doesn't get used a whole lot in the receiving game. So both of these guys, both JD McKissic and Antonio Gibson, are inside of my top 30 running backs because of Tampa Bay's propensity to allow running back pass catchers to do damage to them. I still think you can flex JD McKissic if you need to. But like I said, Antonio Gibson's role is the important part and important takeaway from this game. Hopefully he can get back to normal. Browns at Patriots. Start Nick Chubb if he plays. Flex Damian Harris / Ramondre Stevenson, depending who plays. So Chubb is currently dealing with COVID. He did test positive on, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday. Dearness Johnson was deemed a close contact, and Demetric Felton also tested positive. So Chubb is, double vax, so he should be good to go this Sunday with 2 negative tests. If he's not, obviously, Dearness Johnson is a top 24 running back play. This is a good matchup for Nick Chubb, Dearness Johnson, whoever ends up playing the starting role in this one. It's going to be a good matchup for the Patriots defense that just cannot stop the run right now. On the Patriots side of things, of course, we know that the Pats running backs both suffered concussions last week. Both Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris suffered concussions. Usually they'll be good to go the next week. Pretty much that's usually what happens with concussions, unless they're serious. But obviously, pending who plays, you're going to know who to start. If Damian Harris is out, then play Ramondre Stevenson, probably flex Brandon Bolden. If Ramondre Stevenson is out, it gives a slight uptick to Damian Harris, and it also does to Bolden as well, who could be like a desperation flex option. But we know the roles in this backfield by now. When everybody is healthy, Damian Harris is the guy that you want to be starting. But this is a very tough matchup against the Cleveland Browns run defense, who, despite their performance against Joe Mixon last week, has been a very good unit this year. So Falcons at Cowboys. Start Cordero Patterson and Zeke Elliott. Flex Tony Pollard. My premise behind starting Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard last week was right. It was the proper analysis. Just, NFL happened, right? The Cowboys were favored by 10 points against the Denver Broncos. And the reason I liked both of those running backs as really good plays for DFS and for season-long leagues is because of that game script that they were going to be seeing. But they got absolutely wiped by the Broncos, which I didn't see coming. And I'm going to double down again, because they are, again, 10-point favorites against the Atlanta Falcons, who have an even worse run defense than what the Denver Broncos present. So Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, good bounce-back candidates this week if you guys are worried about them. Unfortunately, if it gives you any confidence too, I do play against both Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott in my home league, because the guy who I'm playing against has Joe Mixon, so he's going to have to start Tony Pollard in his starting lineup. But that's basically what I'm going to be dealing with. I expect these guys to go off because I'm playing against them. So Cordero Patterson, on the other hand, is being used all over the field. Great news for all of you guys that didn't trade him away for Nelson Aguilar in week 2, like I did. Cordero Patterson, as you guys could see, is getting a majority of the snaps. He's getting a lot of routes, especially at wide receiver, not just at running back out of the backfield. And he's being targeted 30% of the time that he's running a route as well. So that is great news for those of you guys that have Cordero Patterson. Great waiver pickup so far this year. He's going to be a league winner type of waiver pickup. All right, moving on to the 4 p.m. games. We have the Panthers at Cardinals. In this game, you're going to start CMC and you're going to start James Conner. CMC barely played, as you guys can see on the screen. He only played 49% of the snaps, but he was an integral part of the offense. He got most of the carries. He was targeted 33% of the time that he was running a route. Sam Darnold is not starting in this game. It's been announced basically that he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Thank God, because this offense was an absolute eyesore with Sam Darnold in there. And hopefully PJ Walker can provide a little bit of an upgrade as far as scoring goes to Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore and everybody involved. So I'm sure many of you guys are curious on James Conner. How much work did he actually get once Chase Edmonds left the lineup? Well, here it is. Chase Edmonds played 1 snap, basically got 1 carry and then got injured. James Conner, 77% of the snaps after that, and 55% of the rush attempts, 72% of the routes. He pretty much got everything you could have asked for, right? He got the receiving work, the carries, the short down and distance, inside the 5 attempts. He got the long down and distance 2-minute drill. He got everything that you could have asked for. Now, the question that I have is that going to keep up? Is he going to be a full-on workhorse? Or now that they know Chase Edmonds is out, are they going to integrate Eno Benjamin more into Chase Edmonds' role? That could happen, but I do think that the James Conner is going to still be the primary pass catching back on this team. Is, Eno Benjamin going to run 19% of the routes? Probably not. He'll probably be closer to 40, 50%. But I think James Conner is probably going to run more routes than he does. So good news for those of you guys that have James Conner on your roster. He just saw a massive, massive upgrade. If you want to try and sell him high based on this news, I probably would. But I do think he is a guy that you can hold on to if you're in need of some wins, especially. So Vikings at Chargers, the next game that we have here, start Dalvin Cook and start Austin Eckler. Of course, we got some disturbing news about Dalvin Cook yesterday, potentially being involved in a domestic situation. For now, just make sure that Alexander Mattison is rostered in your league. If he's on the waiver wire, go pick him up because this could turn ugly at some point. But Mattison, as of right now, I'm not going to go out and trade for him and buy high on him or anything, but no news of an investigation just yet. Until that happens, continue to start Dalvin Cook. And he is actually my running back 1 on the week because this Chargers defense is absolutely brutal against the run. And Dalvin Cook is due for a get-right game. Eckler is Eckler, of course. Both defenses are exploitable on the ground, especially the Chargers. And Austin Eckler could be a sneaky buy low candidate if anybody's worried about him. He gets, 20-plus opportunities per game, most of them targets, in one of the best offenses in the league. So I'm not worried about Austin Eckler. If the Austin Eckler owner is, then maybe you should check in and potentially make some offers. So Seahawks at Packers. In this game, you're going to be starting Aaron Jones and sitting Alex Collins. Aaron Jones, we pretty much know his role. Rodgers should be back this week, and that'll help aid his efficiency because Aaron Jones, much like Alvin Kamara, much like DeAndre Swift, Austin Eckler, is a guy that doesn't get a 25 carry workload. He needs to be efficient, and he needs his quarterback, obviously Aaron Rodgers, being in the fold to help him get scoring opportunities and get targets. The Seahawks backfield, on the other hand, is just a complete mess. Until Chris Carson is back, if Chris Carson is back, I honestly don't even know when he's coming back. Just sit all the running backs in this backfield. I know Alex Collins is tempting because it seems like he has a big role, but in reality, Rashad Penny is involved on the ground. Travis Homer is involved through the air. He does take all the long down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps, and you're going to get sniped on goal line carries with Alex Collins as well. So if you have to play him, he's a top 35 running back in my rankings right now, but he's not a guy that I'm excited about playing. I would play both Bills running backs ahead of Alex Collins this week if you have that distinction to make. And I would also play Jeremy McNichols ahead of him if you have that decision to make as well. So the Eagles at Broncos, the final 4 p.m. game, and then we'll move on to the primetime ones. Start Melvin Gordon in this game, flex Javonte Williams in this game, and much like the Seahawks backfield, sit all of the Eagles running backs as well. This is a full-blown committee in Philadelphia until Miles Sanders is back. As you guys can see on the screen, Boston Scott played the most snaps. Jordan Howard got the most carries. Kenneth Gainwell got the inside the 5 attempt, and routes are pretty much split between all of them. So I don't want anything to do with this backfield. I think this backfield is just a complete mess as it is. On the Broncos side of things, Melvin Gordon is still the dude here. Both of these guys are startable pretty much as they are every week against an exploitable defense on the ground and through the air at running back. So we did see Javonte Williams have his first 100-yard game last week. We'll see if that affects the snap share. They did actually play close to a 50-50 split last week, but given the game script, it does make sense why that was the case. They were blowing the Cowboys out, and they had a chance to run the ball at every turn. So on the ground and through the air, like I said, this backfield is due for a good matchup because the Eagles are exploitable through pass catching running backs and through running backs that get their primary value through carries. So both of these guys fit that description. They should be in for good matchups this week. Now, moving on to Sunday Night Football, the Chiefs at Raiders, AFC West divisional showdown. Darrell Williams is in your starting lineup, as is Josh Jacobs as a flex type of running back. Darrell Williams should be viable for the next couple weeks, I would say, because the Chiefs have a bye week in week 12. It's currently week 10. I'd imagine that Clyde Edwards-Helaire won't be back until week 13 after the bye week. It only makes sense from a team perspective. Why would you rush him back this week or next week when you have a bye week coming up to get him even more rest? I mean, the Chiefs are barely winning games, so maybe they could use Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but at the same time, it's not like Darrell Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a huge difference, in my opinion. So I think they're probably just going to rest Clyde until week 13. So Darrell Williams, those of you guys that have him, should be viable for the next 2 weeks at least. And he does have a great matchup this week against the Las Vegas Raiders run defense. So Josh Jacobs, on the other hand, he did see a shift in his role coming out of the bye week. Maybe the Raiders took a week and realized of how much money that they're actually paying Kenyon Drake, because his role was a big time upgrade for Kenyon Drake and a big time downgrade for Josh Jacobs. From weeks 4, 5, and 6, we saw Josh Jacobs getting like 60% of the snaps, most of the carries, and actually a higher percentage of the routes. As you guys can see, 50% was about the range that he was sitting at over the course of those couple of weeks. Then, of course, he got injured in week 7, left the game with a chest injury. So we're kind of going to throw that usage out the window. But then in week 9, when he came back, was only a 49% snap share, running back 65% of the carries as usual, but his routes took a downtick, as did his target share in general, and some of the long down and distance 2-minute drill snaps that he was starting to see in the midpoint of the season. So, it's worth noting Kenyon Drake's not a guy that I'm willing to roster, but he does have a pretty good backup appeal if Josh Jacobs were to miss any time. Now to the final game, we have Monday Night Football, Rams at 49ers. In this game, you're going to start Darrell Henderson and you're going to start Elijah Mitchell. The one thing I would say about Darrell Henderson is that Sony Michel has been eating into his role a little bit. This is why I kind of wasn't in on Darrell Henderson. As you guys have known, I've kind of been a little hesitant all season to say this is a top 12 running back the rest of the year or whatever, because the workload may be catching up to him. He wasn't a guy that I thought could handle a full workload. Anytime we've seen him with a full workload, he's gotten injured in the past, and he was in a committee even going back to his college days. So kind of dialing back his workload a bit. So make sure you stash Sony Michel on your bench if you have Henderson or if you don't have Henderson, because he does provide a good amount of upside to your bench with playoffs coming up. If you're a 7-2 team, an 8-1 team, a 9-0 team, throw out a Bryan Edwards for Sony Michel type of trade and see if that fantasy manager is willing to buy into a guy like Bryan Edwards, or even hell, I'd be even willing to give up a guy like Jacoby Myers if you don't need him, and just stash Sony Michel on your bench, because if anything does happen to Henderson, he already is dealing with an ankle injury. Sony Michel is going to be a guy that is going to help carry a big workload and be a guy that potentially can win leagues for people down the stretch. As you guys can see, Dwayne McFarland did write this in the blurb of Sony Michel and Darrell Henderson's usage. He said, downgrade. Henderson saw a reduction in playing time in the passing game outside of the snaps he lost due to an ankle injury. The Rams utilized the 2-minute offense the least of anybody in the league, so it might not matter, but Michel did eat into his workload more or less, so it is something to keep an eye on, basically. On the Elijah Mitchell side of things, he did see a nice uptick in terms of his receiving workload, but that was mainly due to game script. Of course, they were losing big to the Arizona Cardinals. We'll have to see how Jeff Wilson coming back to this backfield impacts it going forward. He was active last week, but he didn't actually play any snaps, wasn't on the field at all. So we'll see if they try and integrate him into this running back rotation. Does that affect Hasty? Do they just put Wilson ahead of him, or do they take a bit away from Elijah Mitchell, give some to Wilson, and then this is a little bit more of a committee approach? As I mentioned on Tuesday, Elijah Mitchell is still a guy that I'm trying to shop away if I can get anything that resembles an elite running back in return. So if you can take Elijah Mitchell and pair him with a Robert Woods, or pair him with any wide receiver that you know is a mid-level wide receiver 3, Tyler Lockett, who's getting Russell Wilson back, and you can upgrade to a Dalvin Cook, a Austin Eckler, a Aaron Jones, a Joe Mixon, like anybody that is very valuable, then go ahead and try and do that, because Elijah Mitchell is very risky for a number of reasons that I outlined on Tuesday. So if you guys enjoyed that video, let me know how you guys liked the matchups on the screen rather than me kind of talking about it, because it makes the video a lot more concise. I'm sure this video was shorter than it usually is. So if you guys did enjoy this video though, like it, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, we're trying to hit 8,000 subscribers ASAP. We are pretty close to it right now. So try and help us get there. If you haven't already subscribed, I promise you, you will not regret it. Peace out, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.